Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one was posted by user Meyerwood91 on our own subreddit, and it is titled, "I guess you can grow chickens. Don't mess with a farmer." More tales from bylaw and code enforcement. My friend, 32 male, is a bylaw enforcement officer for a small township. We swap work stories at the pub on Wednesday nights, and this particular story did not involve my friend, the bylaw officer. However, he was aware of the fiasco and thought it would be appreciated. Background of the story. This story is from the west coast of Canada and involves a few levels of government. Generally speaking, local governments, cities, townships, villages, municipalities and regional districts are the sole authority for establishing zoning regulations. Zoning tells you what types of uses are permitted and what types are not. However, my province, like a state for you American readers, has established an agricultural zone for key farmland, which represents about 5% of the land base of the province. If your property falls under this agricultural zone, the local government cannot restrict most agricultural uses, but the province restricts most non-farm uses. Onto the story. Farmer Joe started a chicken farm in the early 1990s and by the early 2000s had quite the prospering business. Joe is a practical guy and realized that a big cost associated with his business was sending off his chickens to the slaughterhouse some 45 minutes away. Joe figured that he would do better if he built his own abattoir, chicken slaughterhouse, but alas, his tiny farm had no room. In the mid-2000s, Joe had a huge stroke of luck and was able to purchase a 40-acre property from an old family friend. While the property was technically in the city, it was on the outskirts of the city and was in the provincial agricultural zone. Joe was thrilled at the business opportunity and bought the land. Joe invested some $45,000 in designing the building, which required engineering, an architect, etc., but made sure that everything was up to code before dropping his building permit off at the township. Unbeknownst to Joe, the township was not happy about the abattoir and has discouraged others from applying for them in the past. After about 1 month of waiting for an update, Joe called into the township. "Joe, hello, I'm just touching bases to see how my building permit is coming along. Do you guys need anything?" Building inspector: "Oh, you're the chicken farmer, right? There's an issue with your permit. I'm going to transfer you to our zoning guy." Zoning guy: "Hello Joe, we cannot approve your building permit due to planning reasons. Abattoirs are not permitted on your land and you would have to change your zone to allow one. There is only 2 abattoirs in the township and they are located in industrial zones. I don't know if the neighbors would support an abattoir." Joe was ready to call BS because he knew that the provincial regulations allowed an abattoir provided that 50% of the animals processed in the facility were grown on his property. But Joe kept a level head and decided to placate the township. Joe: "Oh, okay, I will apply to rezone then." Zoning guy: "I don't think that would be a good idea. Your neighbors are going to fear that a poultry slaughterhouse will impact their property values and pollute the aquifer." Joe: "I think I can make a good case. Please send me the application forms." Zoning guy: "Okay, but I think you should reconsider." Joe: "Noted." A week later, Joe received the application package from the township and started putting together his proposal. Joe attempted to proactively address neighborhood concerns by pointing out that the abattoir had been designed to not be visible from the road, that he was allowed to have a poultry farm, and that all the processing would be done indoors so noise should not be an issue. Furthermore, the CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and Local Health Authority have regulations in place to ensure that processing is done in a safe way and so that waste does not pollute groundwater. Joe also pointed out that he had received provincial approval for his farm business because it was within the provincial agricultural zone. Joe also noted that his business would help other small-scale farmers who were struggling to find local affordable places to take their poultry for processing. Joe's application was received by the city and they took their application fee. Apparently, a few city officials reached out to Joe and tried to convince him that it would be in the best interest of the community if he withdrew his application, but Joe would not budge. 6 months into the process, a public hearing was held and it was likely. Joe reiterated the benefits of his proposal at the hearing and explained that it was permitted under provincial law, so the hearing was not really necessary, but he wanted to be a good neighbor and see if there were concerns he could address. 13 people voiced their disapproval. Examples included: Citizen number 1, I am opposed, this is going to pollute the groundwater. Citizen number 2, I tried to do the same thing a few years ago and was told no. If I cannot have it, you should not have it. Citizen number 3, we don't know how many chickens you grow, this should be on industrial land. Number 4, I board horses on my property, this would be smelly, noisy, and I would lose customers. Citizen number 5, I think it is cruel to slaughter chickens. Why can't you farm vegetables instead? Number 6, there are already rats and crows in my yard. This will attract more pests. Citizen number 7, my children play outside. This business will increase traffic and one of them will be hit. Think of the kids. After the hearing, Joe was interviewed by the local newspaper and they simply stated, we will just let Township go through its phases. They will be voting in a few weeks, let's see what they come back with and then we will take it from there. A few weeks later, the Township Council reviewed the staff report, summary of the public hearing record and all letters received regarding Joe's project. The council unanimously rejected the application, noting that the size of the business was inappropriate for the area. They acknowledged that the proposal met provincial standards but felt that it was against the standards of the community. One voiced concern that the province may get involved and overturn the township's decision under the provincial regulations. After each councillor gave their speech, Joe was told it was a no-go. Joe did not want to go to the hassle of hiring lawyers, so he reached out to the commission that oversees the provincial agricultural zone, the minister-politician responsible for the agricultural branch of the provincial government, and a few farmer groups to obtain their support. The minister penned a rather damning letter to the township explaining that their decision was not appropriate as they did not have the authority to restrict the farm use. Similarly, the commission sent a memo to the township's staff explaining that they could not restrict the use, and the farmer groups criticized the township in the local news outlets. Joe took this information and provided it to the city chief's building inspector along with a resubmission of his building permit application for the abattoir and demanded that the permit be issued. In response, the building inspector provided a formal letter to Joe explaining that the permit was denied because the abattoir was an unlawful use. The inspector also reiterated that the application to change the zoning to allow for an abattoir was rejected by the council. Government speak for, sorry Joe, you're out of luck. Joe attempted to go to the city manager and provide letters from the province, which explained in detail that the township was in error and could not restrict a legitimate farming operation. The township disagreed and told Joe that in 1999 the agricultural branch allowed the township to restrict meat processing but would not provide further info without an extensive freedom of information request, which may or may not yield the right paperwork to Joe. It would be redacted. The alternative was to sue and see the information in discovery. Joe was fed up and decided to build his abattoir anyways. Joe found a contractor and built that abattoir over a weekend when the township's building inspectors were not working. On Monday morning, some 50 complaints were made to the township and the bylaw enforcement officer came to Joe's property to investigate. Officer, Joe, I'm getting reports that you have done unlawful construction. Is that true? Joe, no, all the construction here is legal. Officer, what about that? Points to the abattoir. Joe, that is a legal building. Officer, I don't think you have a permit for that, Joe. You will have to stop work on it. Joe, that's okay. The work is done, so we can definitely stop work on it. Officer, Joe, this is putting us in an awkward situation. I will have to go back to my higher-ups and look into enforcement options, but this is serious. Joe, noted. The township council was very angry that Joe had gone ahead with construction and took legal steps to prevent Joe from using the building and implied that they would seek a court order to have the building demolished. In response, Joe sued the township. The township responded to Joe's lawsuit by issuing daily fines for building without a permit, and these fines had reached upwards of $125,000 by the time the case was before a judge. The lawsuit, Joe made his case to the judge and provided all the evidence and requested that the courts declare that the abattoir is a legal use, that the township must amend their bylaws within 60 days, and that the township's chief building officer be compelled to issue the building permit for his abattoir. Joe also pointed out that the $125,000 were unreasonable and appeared to be an intimidation tactic in response to his lawsuit. The township made their case and pointed to a 1999 approval from the agricultural branch which allowed the township to change their definition of agricultural use, meaning a building or use providing for the growing, rearing, producing and harvesting of agricultural products. Includes the processing and/or sale on an individual farm of the primary agricultural products harvested, reared or produced on that farm, and eliminated the term rearing. The township's position was that poultry is not an agricultural product that is grown, rather it is reared. Therefore, the proposed abattoir cannot be considered to be a bona fide agricultural use. The township explained that through this entire ordeal, each government agency which expressed to the township that their view that its refusal to permit was inconsistent with provincial law was in error because these government agencies did not understand that chickens are not grown, they are reared. The judge quickly pointed out that the memo the township provided to the agricultural branch in 1999 was detailed and explained that the purpose of the changes to the definition of agricultural use was in response to new legislation in 1999 which dealt with mushroom farms. The township acknowledged this but argued that the provincial minister in charge of the agricultural branch should have foreseen that the elimination of rearing would prevent an abattoir, so their position was still valid. The township suggested that the minister effectively approved any prohibition or restriction on the use of farmland created by definition, regardless of the minister's understanding and intention at the time the statutory approval was issued. The judge explained that the township's position was not reasonable, and after going through case law to back up his verdict, he explained to the township that their position that chickens are not grown, but rather are reared or kept, was in layman terms BS. After all, the township's March 8, 1999 letter to the minister is abundantly clear that the purpose and intent was limited to including mushroom farms. Had the intention been to prevent an abattoir, the township would have been expressed in the explanatory memo provided to the minister. The judge also educated the township, explaining that animals are indeed grown. After all, growing is a synonym of rearing, and rearing describes a process where animals are grown. The judge also noted that he was very concerned that the township had issued $125,000 of fines for a matter that was before the courts. Unfortunately, he could not make a judgment on it as the matter of costs was not included in the court case. However, he did encourage Joe to consider making a subsequent lawsuit for costs, and that the township would be wise to avoid the fees. The judge also noted that 3 high levels of government agencies had expressed to the township that it was wrong. So it would be difficult to not view the fines as intimidation. While it was not expressly said, Joe could be entitled to his lost earnings that were impacted by the town's enforcement, which would also be significant. Moral of the story: don't mess with a farmer. The next one is titled Enjoy Waking Up Early. To preface, this story wrapped up last night. The background: I was dating a guy, boyfriend long distance, last summer, and things were going pretty well. I was in DC and boyfriend was in Chicago. I was about to move to Spain temporarily for a really cool opportunity, and boyfriend and I discussed that after I returned to the US I would move to Chicago and we would go from being long distance to a normal couple. My lease was going to end right as I was going to move to Spain. Instead of finding a way to store all my things for a year and then subsequently move them to Chicago, I figured that this was a perfect time to downsize. I got rid of a lot of clothing, sold my furniture, and just decided to keep some essentials, sentimental items, and portable, expensive electronics. I only brought the essentials to Spain, whatever would fit in my luggage, and boyfriend ordered to store my sentimental items and electronics. I did not mind him using and borrowing the electronics while I was gone, game console and games, JBL speaker and my Hue lights, and he installed the Hue lights in his condo. I visited him for a week and a half right before moving to Spain, and we had a little bit of tension and the visit was a little bit rocky. I thought we were going to be able to work through things and recover, but right as I moved to Spain, boyfriend ghosts me for a month and then breaks up with me over a text message. We briefly text about how I can get my belongings back as well as the $400 he owes me. So I was depressed and lacking a support group in Spain, coupled with the language barrier, and I decide to return to the US sooner than anticipated, and I actually end up moving to Chicago anyways because I was over DC and got a nice job offer in Chicago. Boyfriend returns my sentimental items on his own accord, but does not return my electronics other than my game console. I tried to contact him, but he blocked my number, Instagram, WhatsApp, Venmo, and Splitwise. I tried approaching him in person the couple of times I bumped into him and asked him if we could discuss my electronics and the money he owes me, and he completely blows me off and is extremely rude. Obviously, I conclude that he has no intention to return my electronics or pay me back the money he owes me, and I am angry. I try to be patient and diplomatic and attempt to talk to him a few more times whenever I bumped into him, but he was acting the same. I finally write him an email saying, "Don't worry about the money you owe me, please just return my things," and gave my roommate his phone number so that they could coordinate. He finally responds to my roommate and says that he will send someone over the weekend to return my things. Yay! When the person dropped off my things, they only brought the games and speaker, boyfriend kept my Hue lights. I run into him once more and ask him when I could get my Hue lights back. He shrugs. I asked him if he planned on returning them. He shrugs again. I ask him point blank if he was stealing them from me, and he says, "I guess you could call it that." I finally give up and decide to order new Hue lights and cut my losses. Now, the revenge. When I was setting up my new Hue lights, I noticed that I was still connected to my prior pair that my boyfriend had stolen and that some of them were even on. I think it's a glitch or something and I turn them off and don't think about it, but then they came back on. I was confused and curious, so I turned them off again. A few seconds later they came back on. I suddenly realized that I was still connected and had just shut off BF's lights twice. I beam with excitement. I don't turn them off again because I don't want him to figure out what is going on. BF does not work until about noon and likes to sleep in until 11 AM. He is also very sensitive to light when he sleeps, so much so that he has blackout curtains so that he can sleep in that long. I personally wake up at 7 AM to go to work, so for the last couple of weeks I've made it a habit of turning BF's lights on at the same time that I wake up and watching them go off a few minutes later, giving me the sweet satisfaction that I am disturbing his sleep in the morning. I don't think I've ever been so happy to wake up in the morning. I do this for a couple of weeks until he reaches out to my roommate and finally returns my lights last night. I suppose he thought they were defective or something. Obviously, I didn't post while I was enacting my petty revenge, as I did not want my fun to be cut short. But now that my lights have been returned, I am posting. For just a tad more petty revenge, I hope he finds this post. It would be the icing on the cake. I want him to know it was me. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.